Over the next several videos, I want to talk about the various layer style effects that are available within Photoshop CS5. Now each one of these is going to get their very own video, and we'll break down how each one works so that you can see the intricacies of playing with them. Now I'll give you kind of a warning, and this is is a little bit more of an opinion, I suppose, than anything else, but it's something I think you should be aware of. Overdoing layer styles or applying them too heavily will tend to make your work look a little cheesy, so just be aware of that. Photoshop aficionados and people who use Photoshop a lot can spot the overuse of layer styles from a mile away, particularly with certain effects like bevel and emboss and things. I'm not saying don't use them. By all means, use them because they are extremely useful when you need a particular effect. But if you make them extremely loud and extremely visible, it can make your work look fairly cheap. I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a warning. Heed it or don't as you see fit. Now, before I jump into each and every individual layer style, there are a couple of settings I want to bring up that are not what I would consider the most discoverable inside of Photoshop, but they're very, very cool. Now, the first layer style I wanted to talk about was drop shadow, and drop shadow is one of a few layer style effects that have this global light setting right here, and I wanted to talk about that as well as another setting as well. So what I'm going to do for starters is just apply a drop shadow just by clicking on it. I'm not going to change any of the settings, so you can follow along very easily without even really knowing how drop shadow works, and just click OK. Next, if you go under layer, jump down to layer style, there are a couple of little tiny options down here at the bottom that really only exist here. The first is the global light dialog. So if we hit global light, we have the ability to adjust this light. And if you look really closely, you can see our shadow waggling around. If it's not apparent enough for you, what I can do is take my drop shadow, open it up. Now I just did that by double clicking on the effect itself. So I put my mouse right on drop shadow, double clicked, and the window popped up with drop shadow already highlighted. Keep that in mind. And I can increase the distance to really push that shadow away. Click OK, and now we'll go back over to layer. We'll jump down to layer style and grab our global light. And now I can use this little tiny widget to control the light. And you'll notice that I'm controlling the angle as well as the altitude. So as you move the little light point further away from the surface, you're lowering the altitude. You have to kind of think of this little widget here kind of like a dome. So if you pull this straight up to the top, it's kind of at high noon. And as you start to pull it down, it's kind of like the sun is setting. Kind of like the sun is setting. Now all of that is being offset in this case by the distance option. So the neat thing about the global light itself and why you have it is that it's not just for drop shadow. If we grab a bevel and emboss as well, and to really make this also very apparent, I'll increase the size of the bevel and emboss, and notice that the highlights are coming from the appropriate angle for us to have a shadow in that location, or somewhere nearby that location anyway. So if I click OK and go back over to layer style, and grab the global light, notice that I'm actually affecting both things. So the emboss is updating, so now the highlight is on the opposite side, and the shadow has updated as well, which is why you have a global light in the first place. For each one of these layer styles that make use of a global light, you are given the option of not utilizing the global light. So for instance, if I go to the drop shadow and I uncheck global light, I can now define my drop shadow locally. And this will look a little visually jarring because we have a highlight at the top, but it looks like the shadow is telling us that we're illuminating from underneath. So you're actually sending the viewer mixed signals, which is why we have things like a global light checkbox in the first place. So I just wanted to show you how that works. So you can see that there is a global light. Anytime you see this checkbox, that means if you so desire, you can go up to the layer menu, jump down to layer style, grab the global light and make adjustments. However, any one of these layer styles that utilize the global light checkbox, if you make any changes here inside the layer style, that will update the global light as well. So it's like you're kind of able to change it from any location. You can change it from that dialog, or you can change it from within the layer styles themselves, which means you practically never have to go to that dialog. It's just that if you don't want to have to open up your layer style window to get it for any reason whatsoever, it's good to know that that dialog is there. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you is in terms of these kind of hidden tools is the hide all effects, which we've kind of already seen. So if we click this, all of our effects seem to vanish. It's a little bit different than toggling visibility because right now they're just grayed out. Now this would go for all effects that are on multiple layers across our document. So if I go over to Layer Style and click on Show All Effects, you'll notice the menu option actually changed. If I make multiple copies of our stick figure, which I'm going to do just by dragging this guy down to the New Layer button a couple of times, and then I'll use my Move tool, so select Move tool or tap the V key on your keyboard to select this. I'll just space these out so that we have several different stick figures all kind of scattered across our view. If I now go back over to Layer, Layer Style, and choose Hide All Effects, boom. There's the image without any effects visible whatsoever. So it's a way to switch those off en masse. We'll go ahead and show those. Next, we have the ability to scale all of our effects. So if we go back to Layer Style and we choose Scale All Effects, we can increase or decrease. And what this is doing is taking the active layer, and it's like it's taking all of the intensity sliders within those layer styles and it's cranking them all up simultaneously. I don't think I've ever practically used this, but I did figure I would just go ahead and point it out. And then finally, we have Create Layers, and this is going to do some aspects of the effects cannot be reproduced with layers, and click OK. And what this has done is it has tried to reproduce the effect of our layer out of pixels. So we lost our drop shadow because that just apparently can't be done, but what we ended up with, and if I change the background, I'm going to actually darken up the background. So I'm going to jump down to the background layer and I'll go down to solid color and choose a dark shade of gray for the background. What we've ended up with is a blue stick figure, so it's just like our original, and if we turn off these guys you can see that. And then we've applied kind of a blobby white mask to the top to simulate what's going on with our bevel and emboss, at least in terms of the shine, and then another one from underneath to show off the shading of it. But our drop shadow, which is available down here, that's kind of hiding underneath. So what Photoshop has done is it has taken all of those layer effects and broken them up into individual layers. This is great if you need to make custom edits. So if you're wondering, well, why on earth would you ever want to do that? Well, now I can take the shadow, and if I need to paint some more shadow onto it or erase certain parts of the shadow, I can do that because now it's just pixels. Though ideally, I would take all of this and I would immediately slap it into a group. In fact, for what it's worth, it would be very nice if Photoshop did this. So stick, figure, layer, effect, broken. Or broken up, or however you want to call that. And then if you just want to kind of get fancy, you can alt-click on these guys, and now you can see the result of the bevel and emboss and what it's actually doing under the hood, which is just kind of neat. So again, it just took everything involved with that layer style, and it broke it up into individual layers that can each and of themselves be edited. But you do get that warning saying some of these effects cannot be replicated with individual layers, so just be aware of that. So that is really all I wanted to show here. It's just a quick breakdown of some options that are not available in too many locations and not easy to stumble across, but can be very cool. And that includes the global light, the create layer option, hiding all effects, and scaling our effects. That will wrap up everything for this video. Thanks a lot.